What's up, world? I'm Cameron McKinney, and this is Pop Culture Spotlight, a podcast about the movie 28 years later, The Bone Temple. Here's a quick synopsis. After coming up against the infected for the first time, young Spike has now joined up with a dangerous cult known as the Fingers, led by the dangerous Sir Lord Jimmy Crystal. The film stars Ralph Fiennes, Jack O'Connell, Alfie Williams, Erin Kellyman, and Shai Lewis Perry. Ralph Fiennes is no stranger to playing a character multiple times on screen. He, of course, played Lord Voldemort in 2005's Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, 2007's Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, 2009's Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, 2010's Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1, and 2011's Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. He also played Gareth Mallory, better known as M, in 2012's Skyfall, 2015's Spectre, and 2021's No Time to Die. And now for the second time, he's playing Dr. Ian Kelson in 28 years later, The Bone Temple. 28 years later was really just a glimpse of him as the character. With these performances, Fiennes has really shown why he's an actor people want to see in franchise films. He elevates them with thrilling performances, and that gets me to Bone Temple, where he puts on a real show. Not only is his acting superb, he's also endlessly entertaining. In the movie, Kelson is working with the Alpha Samson to see if there's any humanity left in him. Maybe this is a ridiculous thing to say, but Ralph Fiennes in 28 years later, The Bone Temple gives truly the first great performance of the year 2026. Ralph Fiennes will next be in The Hunger Games: Sunrise on the Reaping, taking over the role of President Snow from the late great Donald Sutherland. There's a part of me that's really interested to see him in a Hunger Games movie, but I also think it's kind of too obvious for him to be a part of, but at the same time I realize he's one of our great actors, and there's no doubt he's going to be able to pull it off. Between this movie and Sinners, actor Jack O'Connell has cemented himself as an actor who's great at playing villains, and like Fiennes, you got a glimpse of his character Jimmy in 28 years later. I'll tell you what recent movie character he reminds me of. Dementis, played by Chris Hemsworth in Furiosa, both went through personal tragedies, and during an apocalypse, they fake their ways to a position of power. O'Connell's Jimmy knows he's a fraud, just like Dementis did in Furiosa. I would say at the early part of the movie that O'Connell's Jimmy is the villain you expect in a movie like this, but then there's kind of a shift, and it's really when he meets Kelson, played by Ralph Fiennes. I thought the scenes between those two were truly incredible, and they are what makes this movie special. That's why I watch movies, to see two actors come together and do something special. O'Connell's next films include Godzilla, Kong, Supernova with Caitlin Dever and Dan Stevens, and Ink from 28 years later director Danny Boyle with Guy Pearce and Claire Foy. Alfie Williams may not be the prohibitive lead of this movie the way he was on 28 years later, but I still walked away impressed. In Bone Temple, we find Spike being a part of terrible things and being an uncomfortable witness. He's been given a great arc in both movies. He's a crucial part of both films. If he's bad, the movies don't work. And finally, I might be in the minority on this one, but my favorite performance of this movie comes from Erin Kellyman, who impressed me with a great turn in David Lowery's The Green Knight. In Bone Temple, she plays Jimmy Ink, one of the members of the Fingers, and she's the one who connects with Spike and realizes he's in over his head and knows that Sir Lord Jimmy is full of it. She feels like a potential star, and she's definitely somebody I would like to see be the lead of a movie. Director Nia DaCosta has shown herself to be a versatile filmmaker. She's made a small indie, Little Woods, a horror in Candyman, a superhero film in The Marvels, an adaptation of Hedda Gabler with Hedda, and now 28 years later, Bone Temple. Danny Boyle brought electric energy to 28 years later. I would say DaCosta's film is more subdued. It doesn't have the same flair or fast-paced and style from 28 years later. It's very good in its own right and stands on its own. She was able to have authorship in a franchise movie, which isn't always the case. For instance, it didn't feel like she had that with the Marvels. She is somebody who is getting really good opportunities to direct big movies, but isn't getting enough credit. I was floored by what she did in 28 years later, The Bone Temple. I think she is a great filmmaker. Let's get into the movie itself. 28 years later, The Bone Temple is what most sequels should aspire to be, in that it's clearly connected to its predecessor, but is also different enough to justify its own existence. It will please the fans of the prior films while also being welcoming to newer audiences and get you excited for what's to come. When you are watching these movies, you feel like there is a purpose to every scene, and I think the biggest reason for that is screenwriter Alex Garland. He knows what he's doing with this story. He knows where it's going. He has a grand plan. I think that is the biggest failure of franchise filmmaking right now, is you will get a great movie, and then you will anticipate its sequel, and then you will see that sequel and you'll go, yeah, that's a fine movie, but it has absolutely nothing to do with the last movie I saw before it. We've seen it in the Star Wars movies. I've been disappointed in the X-Men films in the past for the same reason. There doesn't seem to be any vision for the future when it comes to franchises. They just want to be franchises without doing the hard work. That's what was so special about the MCU for a while. They had a grand plan. We were all on board, and the reason that so many people don't care anymore is because they no longer seemingly have a plan. When you map out where a story is going, it makes it feel like you're truly invested in the movies themselves. This isn't a money grab. You're not just making the next movie to make the next movie. I don't want to rip on a modern movie, but let's take Wicked, for example. Everyone enjoyed that film, and nobody cared about Wicked for good. It got 0 Oscar nominations. The hype around that movie was not the same as the first one, because it felt like they just wanted to make a second movie because they could. The reason why so many people hate the ideas of sequels is because they try to give you what you liked in the first movie without moving the story forward, without doing anything original, and that's not what Alex Garland has done with these last 2 movies. He's using the cachet from 28 Days Later to do something new and original. He has things to say about the current state of the world. What I keep going back to when it comes to the 28 Years Later films, these last 2 ones, is that they are ultimately more surprising than most sequels. And that's what makes them stand up against the rest. What I'm about to say is an extreme example, but Top Gun Maverick was a huge hit, not because it was like Top Gun, but because it was so much more than that original film. Too many sequels do not aspire to be better than the original. I like 28 Years Later and 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, more than I liked 28 Days Later. Because like I said, I think this is a movie that has a lot to say. It has something to say about grief and how we deal with it. With O'Connell's Jimmy character, I think it's saying something about how one event can turn your life upside down and it's impossible to recover from that event. For my money, 28 Years Later and 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple are 2 of the better sequels ever made. And maybe some of you are going to roll your eyes and say, well, most sequels are bad. That bar is not a hard one to climb. But there have been really good sequels. The Empire Strikes Back is a great sequel. I mean, it's an obviously great sequel. The Dark Knight is a great sequel. The aforementioned Top Gun Maverick is a great sequel. And all those movies I just listed are vastly different from one another, but they have one commonality. They take a huge risk. They make that next jump. They are better than the original films. They don't play it safe, and neither does 28 years later, The Bone Temple. This is something that I want to talk about because I was worried about it going in, that they were changing directors. I was like, Danny Boyle just had a renaissance with 28 years later. I didn't know what to expect with Nia DaCosta. She's a great filmmaker, but sometimes when these franchises change directors, things go sideways. I mean, look at what happened with Star Wars after J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson. I mean, those two made Star Wars films very well, but the problem was they didn't feel connected. Thankfully, that was not the case with 28 years later and 28 years later, The Bone Temple. At least I don't feel that way, and maybe some people feel differently, but I think both films work on their own and together as well. I don't know if I'm the only person on earth who wants this. I can be because he's a great filmmaker, but for the third and final film of this new trilogy of 28 years later movies, I want Alex Garland to write and direct the third film. I think he's one of our great filmmakers. I want to see him work with the movie star, spoiler alert, that's going to be in the final 28 years later film. I won't reveal who it is, but it's really obvious. From the sound of things, it's going to be Danny Boyle back in the director's chair, and I'm fine with that. Danny Boyle has done great work with movies written by Alex Garland. I just think that Alex Garland could really pull something special off if he wrote and directed that third and final film. Luckily, he's got an adaptation of Elden Ring on the way. Him doing a video game adaptation is exciting to me. And if you've listened to this podcast, you probably know that I believe Alex Garland to be one of our great screenwriters. He should be mentioned with the likes of Aaron Sorkin, Charlie Kaufman. I mean, look at the work he's produced, the stuff that he's directed as well. I just want him to direct the third film. I don't think it's going to happen, but if it did, I would be beyond pumped to see it. Box office, almost everything is going good for this movie. 28 years later, The Bone Temple. The reviews are good. People think it's as good, if not better, than the last film, but it's not doing well at the box office, grossing just $46 million overall as of right now. I have an opinion as to why I think it's not a popular movie. It's because it lacks star power. Yes, it has Ralph Fiennes, but is he really a box office draw? He's been in plenty of movies that not a lot of people have seen. Jack O'Connell is a good actor. He's not a movie star. One of the reasons I believe a third film is going to be made is because one of the original stars of 28 Days Later is coming back. That is the big draw for the third film. That is why, even though this movie is underperforming, there's likely going to be a third film. The predecessor, 28 Years Later, did better because it had known names. Aaron Taylor Johnson may not be an A-lister, but people know who he is. He's been the lead of movies like Kick-Ass, and then you have Jodie Comer, who has emerged over the years as somebody people have been keeping an eye on. There's also another obvious reason as to why The Bone Temple hasn't done great. It's been less than a year than 28 Years Later. That gives you absolutely no time to anticipate the movie. There are two things that create modern success stories: movies filled with giant movie stars and anticipation for those movies. Look at it, what is currently happening with The Odyssey. It has Matt Damon, Anne Hathaway, Tom Holland, Zendaya, Robert Pattinson, the list goes on. And the movie is coming this summer, and everyone is hyped for that movie. And I'm not naive. I know The Bone Temple was never going to be that. This isn't a franchise that's beloved. I mean, people don't look at 28 Days Later like it's a Bourne movie or a James Bond film. It's not that type of franchise. It doesn't have that history. There was a long layover between the second often ignored film of this franchise, 28 Weeks Later, and 28 Years Later. In the moment, these are two movies in 28 Years Later and 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, that I think are not getting enough credit for how good that they are. I listed 28 Years Later as my favorite movie of 2025. These are going to be two movies that people find over time. They're going to grow into classics. It's kind of what happened with 28 Days Later. Yes, it was a hit, making $82 million on an $8 million budget, but it's not like it was a giant hit. It wasn't the Titanic or anything like that. It was a movie that had a lasting legacy, and I believe 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple will also have a lasting legacy. And I think I speak for all fans of this franchise in saying we need the third and final film of the 28 Years Later trilogy. If we don't get that, I will go absolutely insane. Danny Boyle wants to direct it. Alex Garland has presumably already written it. You're going to have an A-list Oscar-winning actor at the helm of this movie as well. This film needs to happen. I want to see Aaron Taylor Johnson come back. We've gotten a great beginning. We've gotten a great middle. Now you need to give us that great grand finale. This cannot be one of those franchises that gets canceled before it ends. I mean, yes, there have been some franchises that have deserved that treatment. That cannot be the case with the 28 Years Later films. I don't care how much money this movie ends up making total at the box office. That third film is a must. When looking at the box office numbers, one thought I had about these movies is, did they wait too long to make sequels to 28 Days Later? I mean, think about what has happened in the years since. You've had The Walking Dead. You've had The Last of Us. There has been so much zombie movies and TV shows. The two Zombieland films, which I love. Maybe it's an overstatement, but zombies have kind of dominated the culture. And if these movies came out 5 years ago, maybe they would have made more of a cultural impact. Story-wise, it makes sense that they waited this long, but culture-wise, I think they missed the moment in a way. I just keep going back to this. So many franchises have let me down with sequels and no plans of the future, and then you have these two 28 Years Later films. They should become the gold standard. Studios should try to replicate this formula. Pick a great screenwriter like Alex Garland, create a trilogy with a plan, and then let superb filmmakers like Danny Boyle and Nia DaCosta make those movies. People want to watch movies that feel like the directors know where they're going with the story. Yes, quality matters, but I would argue the structure is the key, and the structure of these last two 28 Years Later movies is beyond brilliant. I don't understand how Alex Garland only has one Oscar nomination to his name. He's one of our great screenwriters, and these two films, 28 Years Later and 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, is him staying true to himself as a writer while also making franchise movies. 2 years ago, I did not think a sequel to 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later was necessary. I like those movies. I didn't love those movies. I have absolutely loved almost everything talking about 28 Years Later and 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. The acting, the story, the surprises. These last two movies have everything I want in filmmaking. Thanks for listening to this edition of Pop Culture Spotlight. I'm Cameron McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Thursday on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I highly recommend you check out 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. Next week on the podcast, I'm talking about the film Sentimental Value, starring Renata Reinsva, Stellan Skarsgård, Inga Ibsdottir Ilias, and Elle Fanning, written and directed by Joachim Trier. So tune into that and please rate, review, and subscribe.